1 million people starved to death because of a vegetable your grandmother boils on Sundays. Not a war, not a plague, a potato. To be exact, the potato ruined Europe twice, once by saving it, and once by killing it. And the same trick did both. Here is how. It starts with a plant so distrusted that an entire kingdom made growing it a crime. Europeans looked at the potato and saw the work of the devil. They were, in a strange way, not entirely wrong, because the thing that made the potato a miracle was the exact same thing that made it a loaded gun. The potato was not European at all. It was domesticated in the mountains of Peru and Bolivia nearly 10,000 years ago, long before Rome existed. The people of the Andes were geniuses with it. They froze potatoes overnight, dried them by day, and stomped out the water, making chuno that stored for 20 years. Inca armies marched on that freeze-dried potato. Spanish ships carried the plant home in the 1500s, and Europe took one look and recoiled in horror. The potato is a nightshade, cousin to belladonna and mandrake. Its leaves really are poisonous, and worst of all, it appeared nowhere in the Bible. To a devout European, a plant God forgot to mention was suspicious. They called it the devil's plant, an incarnation of evil grown in the dirt. France went furthest. From 1748, several French provinces banned growing potatoes outright, convinced the ugly tuber gave people leprosy. So how do you make a terrified continent eat something it believes is cursed? You do not argue with it. You trick it. And the man who cracked that problem first was not a farmer or a priest. He was a king with a very cold, very clever mind. Frederick the Great of Prussia ruled sandy, hungry land where wheat failed and famine was routine. He saw in the potato a way to keep his people alive. In 1774, he ordered his subjects to plant potatoes. The town of Kolberg wrote back that the things had no taste, and not even dogs would eat them. Frederick was not a patient man. When towns refused, he reportedly threatened to cut off the ears and noses of anyone who would not plant. Charming. But threats grow no crops, so Frederick tried psychology instead. He posted armed royal guards around his potato fields, as if the plants were treasure worth protect. By day, the soldiers stood watch. By night, they quietly vanished. And the peasants, now certain these guarded royal vegetables must be precious, crept in to steal them. They stole the potatoes. They planted the potatoes. And Frederick, watching his own reverse psychology con work perfectly, had turned suspicion into hunger for the crop. Meanwhile, a French army pharmacist named Antoine Parmentier was rotting in a Prussian prison, fed nothing but the potatoes the French dismissed as pig feed. Parmentier expected to die on that diet. Instead, he thrived and walked out of captivity a fanatic, convinced this humble tuber could end famine in France forever. Back home, he stole Frederick's playbook down to the last detail. He fenced a potato field near Paris, guarded it by day, and left it wide open at night. Parmentier went further than any king. He threw lavish potato dinners for Benjamin Franklin and handed bouquets of potato flowers to the royal court itself. The trick worked exactly as it had in Prussia. Parisians climbed the fence nightly to pilfer the royal potato, and France slowly fell in love with what it once banned. Marie Antoinette wore potato blossoms in her hair. In 1785, when harvests failed across northern France, the once scorned potato held back famine. Now the real reason kings push so hard becomes clear. A single field of potatoes could feed roughly 3 times as many people as the same field of wheat. Think about what that means for a ruler. 3 times the food from the same land means 3 times the peasants, the soldiers, the taxpayers, the empire. So Europe planted potatoes with abandon. Historians estimate the crop drove nearly a quarter of all the population growth in the Old World between 1700 and 1900. The effect reached across the planet. In Qing China, potatoes and sweet potatoes fed armies and settlers as the empire swelled to nearly triple its former size. 2 wars in this era were fought largely over the vegetable. In 1778, Prussia and Austria fought the War of the Bavarian Succession. Soldiers barely clashed. They just marched about trying to eat each other's potato supply. until the local potatoes ran out and everyone went home. They nicknamed it the Potato War. The vegetable Europe once called cursed was now so vital that armies starved each other of it instead of fighting. Here is the trap nobody saw. Remember the trait that made the potato a miracle? Potatoes do not grow from seeds. You plant a piece of another potato. That means every potato you plant is a genetic copy of its parent, a perfect clone, reliable, identical, and utterly without variation from one plant to the next. In the Andes, there were thousands of different potato varieties, over 100 in a single valley. That diversity was a shield against any one disease. But Europe had imported only a tiny handful of types, and nowhere leaned harder on a single one than Ireland, which bet almost everything on one variety. By the 1840s, roughly 3 million Irish people ate almost nothing but the potato, and almost all of them grew the very same kind, the Irish lumper. This was not a free choice. British landlords had squeezed Irish tenants onto tinier and tinier plots, and only the potato yielded enough calories to survive on so little land. Meanwhile, the grain, the cattle, the dairy Ireland produced were shipped off to England for profit. Millions of people balanced their entire lives on one clone crop. Then, in 1845, it arrived. A water mold called Phytophthora infestans, likely carried on ships from the Americas, drifted into Irish fields. It loved the cool, damp Irish air. Its spores rode the rain from plant to plant, and it could rot an entire field into black slime in a matter of days. And because every lumper was a clone, not one single plant carried a gene to resist it. The disease that could kill one potato could kill all of them. It did. The blight struck in 45, returned worse in 46, and kept coming back year after brutal year, erasing the food of a nation each time. Roughly 1 million people starved or died of disease, 1 in every 8 people in Ireland. It remains the worst famine 19th century Europe ever saw. Another 2 million fled across the ocean. Ireland's population crashed from over 8 million to 6.5, and a century later had still not recovered. That is the second ruin. The very trait that let the potato feed millions, its flawless cloning, is what let one mold starve millions in a few years. The potato did not change. It was a miracle and a loaded gun the entire time, exactly as those frightened Europeans dimly sensed when they called it cursed. They were right for the wrong reason. The danger was never the devil. It was the temptation to lean an entire civilization on one perfect, identical thing. We still plant that temptation today. A handful of cloned crops feed most of the planet, each one a lumper waiting for its own blight to find it. So the next time you salt a plate of fries, remember the lumpy brown root that saved Europe, ruined it twice, and is quietly still holding the world hostage. Because the most dangerous vegetable in history is the one everyone agreed was too boring to fear. The Andes never made that mistake. They kept their thousands of potatoes, their 100 kinds in a single valley, their shield of glorious difference. They understood something Europe forgot in its hunger. Safety was never in the perfect crop. Safety was always in the messy, unpredictable, unrepeatable, many. Frederick got his empire. Parmentier got his statues and his soups named after him. Ireland got a wound that never fully closed. One tuber did all of it. Fed kings, starved villages, moved millions across an ocean, and reshaped which faces fill entire nations today. History loves a villain with a crown or a sword, but the thing that rewrote a continent was sitting on the dinner plate the whole time. We buried the lesson with the dead and kept the habit. One crop, one comfort, one fragile bet, repeated at a scale the Irish never dreamed of. The blight that found the lumper was not special. It was patient. Monocultures do not fail because they are unlucky. They fail because they are the same. So keep your Sunday potatoes. Just remember they carry a story darker than any battle in your textbook ever bothered to tell you. A vegetable saved a continent, ruined it twice, and is still out there, in the soil, waiting to teach the same lesson again. Next time, the war Australia fought against birds and lost. because history was so much stranger than they told you.